I can call the meeting to order. Today is December 4th, and this is a Committee on Ways and Means. And if I could ask Councilmember Waring, if you would please provide us with an invocation.
We normally rise for City Council, so I'm going to ask you to rise for the prayer doing Ways and Means. Thank you. Eternally Father, as we come before you, we ask for our best decorum and our best intellect to be applied today as we go about sorting out the income and expenses for the City of Charleston for the upcoming year 2019. We pray for our leadership of our country, we pray for our President, and we give heartfelt condolences to the Bush family and all the leadership that he, his wife, his sons and family has brought to this country. We shouldn't let that go mindful, and we appreciate the country taking a pause and paying just respect. We pray for our mayor and his family who recently lost a mother, and all of us who have experienced that knows there's nothing easy about that, but be with them during their time of need. We pray for our staff because they're second to none. We don't get ranked in all these fine magazines that our friends tell us about near and far without the people who a lot of times faces aren't on the front page, but if they didn't show up, our city would almost close down. We pray for our military who are in harm's way, keeping us safe. Please keep them in your embrace. And we pray for our families. These prayers we ask for in your name. Let us all say, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Item 2 is the approval of minutes. Both minutes have been deferred, so we'll move on to item 3, and that's a recommendation on the State Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee. Is there a motion?
Second.
Discussion. This is the State Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee.
Is that reconciliation from last year or the recommendation for this year?
Yeah, this is item A is the 2018 amended state accommodations tax budget, and 19 is the proposed state accommodation tax budget. We can take it separate, but I think there's only motion required on B, correct?
We take it separately, but my motion was to approve both.
That's the only one we're taking motion.
Second.
Right?
Take it both.
Well, actually, 18 is amended. Right?
Take both.
Yeah. All right. So we'll take them both at the same time.
Okay, so who made the motion?
Congressman Seekin, did you have a comment?
I'm just trying to figure out which items we're taking up. A and B?
A and B.
Correct.
Okay, let's
Please.
So we're reconciling, Amy, I might need your help with all this. We're reconciling the 2018 budget, correct? In which they're
We're amending it, yeah.
amending it to which there's a surplus, correct? How much is that?
87,000.
Okay, and what happens with that money?
It goes into fund balance at the end of the year once we, right, Kathy? Yeah, so when the year end and we close everything out, it'll go into fund balance for state accommodations tax.
To be used for?
It just goes to fund balance.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to figure out where does that ultimately go? Does that get rolled into?
It does not go to the general fund. It stays in its own, accommodations tax is, it's a special revenue fund. It stays in its own fund as a fund balance for that fund.
Okay, did we have a 2017 surplus?
Probably.
And do we know what happened with that money?
It always goes into fund balance. It's just like general fund reserves. If you have a surplus, it goes into fund balance.
So there's just a growing fund balance in the accommodations?
Yeah, we try to make sure that we keep a certain percentage in there in case we have some type of weather event, so we watch that.
All right, and so
Yeah.
we then have a committee recommendation for the allocations, is that correct? Correct. All right. And I'd like to ask the chairman if he can give us sort of a general outline on how the numbers were allocated to all the separate entities, particularly those who were cut between 2018 and 2019.
The committee relies on the, in most cases...
Councilman Gregory. Microphone. Thank you.
the committee relied on staff recommendations that were approved by the mayor, for the most part.
And there were some that were cut back. I noticed Southeastern Wildlife, the Gibbs, who else? Well, I'm trying to I'm going to get to that eventually. So who else was given less than they asked for and funded for the last years? The Gibbs?
The Gibbs.
Southeastern Wildlife.
Okay.
Who else?
Okay. Before we move forward, okay, the committee's recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, for Southeastern Wildlife was not 165. It was the staff's recommendation. So there, and it's my understanding that when this document went through the ad hoc budget committee, there were recommendations for increases. Okay? So what we have here is not only the recommendations from the committee, but also amendments from the ad hoc committee. And it would be great if the budget staff can tell us the distinction between the two.
I can, but the budget you have right there is the committee's budget. It's what the committee recommended. It does not have any ad hoc changes included in that, what you have before you.
Okay, why I question it is because, if I'm not mistaken, one of the discussions that we had at our meeting was the reduction with regard to seaweed. Okay, and if you look at what the committee recommended, it wasn't 165. They requested 165. That's what they were funded last year. And they were reduced on the recommendations from the committee, if I'm not mistaken.
No, this was what the committee went with, was the 165.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the ad hoc committee did not make any recommendations with regard to seaweed?
No, we did not.
It was restored.
Well, nothing's changed from the committee's budget at all, because that's what we have to present to you. So this is the committee's budget.
Okay. What about so we do we then include those that were not funded, okay, of which the committee said anything that was late would not be funded, okay? Any of those in here?
No, none of them
No.
are on here.
Okay, all right. Then I do stand by the budget recommendations from the ad hoc committee.
You mean from the external?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
from the accommodations committee.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Well, one of the things, I'm trying to figure out how things changed between the ATAX committee, the ad hoc committee, and now.
This is the committee's budget. It is the committee, not ad hoc, it is the ATAX committee's budget.
So the late applications are not funded?
That's right.
Okay. All
That's right. Not
So-
on this.
Can we use 2018 excess monies to fund requests for 2019?
You okay with that? Yeah, you can do
So
that.
I would move to amend the 2019 budget to put the Gibbs back at their 2018 level using the 2018 monies that are out there to $20,000. Thank you.
You're going to keep a total of this, right?
All right, so, Councilman Moody, did you accept that amendment? Is that what I heard? Okay.
Can I just make one comment about this? So we don't have September revenues yet, so this is a surplus as of now. We don't know how we're going to do for the rest of the year until the end of the year. So it might be a surplus now, but
To the extent there's a surplus up to and including
Yeah.
$20,000,
Just-
that is my motion.
All right, Councilman Griffin?
I also see on here that we are taking $10,000 away from the South Carolina Aquarium. I would like, if we have surplus
Well,
left over.
that's, are we, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I would like to amend that motion to include, if we have surplus left over, they get their $10,000 that we're taking away.
You willing to accept that amendment as well?
I mean, I don't know why we carry this money over. So if we got the money and we cut these organizations, let's put it back in and let's go with it. So that'd be 20 and 10, 30 and 85.
All right.
Something else, but we can do it later, right? If we come back and if
We'll see how we do at year end, and if there's an issue, then we'll let you know. Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion?
This is 18.
Yeah.
Councilman Gregory? Oh, Mr. Mayor, excuse me.
Yeah. Go ahead, do it.
I'd like to make a motion that we add $10,000 back to Art Forms and Theater Concepts, Inc. They had been awarded $20,000 last year, and their budget had been cut in half.
And, you know, perhaps it's not appropriate to discuss why the committee did that publicly.
Right.
We had to go into executive session to have some discussion with regard to that.
I see.
So the committee strongly recommended that reduction. I can fill you in after the meeting on why.
Okay. Well, I would like to add $10,000 back then to the Charleston Symphony. No, I'll accept the chairman's.
Okay, so now.
And where's the symphony right now? I'd like to.
Mr. Ward, can you give us a number again, as what is in the surplus we all?
80.
It's 87 from 2018, which is what is being asked to be used, is the 2018 surplus that we have right now.
30.
20,
Well, it's 20 and 10, that's 30. Last time I checked.
got it.
Where's the Food
20.
and Wine Festival on here? Do you see it?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Waring? And we'll come back to you, Mr. Mayor, once you find that information. Councilman Waring, so we can keep moving along?
We do have the right to amend this between now and certainly December, January, whatever. So instead of making sausage today on the floor, can we get together on these minor changes?
And I do think this is going to require 3 readings, correct? No, this is a
It only
1
takes
reading?
one. It only takes one.
So we would bring it back at some point in the future
On the
as a separate
18th.
amended budget if there are items we want to.
That's right.
If
We
we
could bring
could-
it back on the 18th.
If we could, Mr. Mayor, if we could pass this and get together on these little changes, most of them are nuances, and then bring it back on the 18th.
Well, that could give an opportunity also for Councilman Gregory and the mayor to have a
We're going
conversation.
to keep the
Right.
Gibbs in there, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think those are already been accepted by Councilman Moody, so I think we're fine with there. Are you okay with that, Mr. Mayor?
Well,
Sophia Institute.
so the ones we discussed the other day, like the jazz
Right.
festival, you want to hold off on that?
Well, I mean, we can do all those, but instead of making, again, I think we can get together, come back with if we pass this, come up with an amended budget, and on the 18th,
Yeah.
with these little changes, I think we'll be able to accomplish that in 2 weeks, as opposed to, as I say, making sausage on the floor, council.
And
All right, so what's on the floor right now? It's the aquarium and the Gibbs?
That's right.
Okay.
30 and the 80s.
And can I just add one more then, and we'll come back to the others? And it's just because our Hanukkah celebration is this weekend, and admittedly, they were late. So I did want to add them back in. It would be nice to be able to let them know that this weekend while we're having the festival. So we were going to ask that they be restored to $5,000.
And by the way, we had this discussion during our committee meeting that the council may have some recommended changes.
Right.
So it's not unexpected.
All right.
Are we gonna make this sausage tonight, or are we?
It looks like.
Make part of it.
All right, I'll accept this file, but I'm not accepting.
All right, that's a good idea, all right. Okay. All right, so you want to read them back just so we,
But we're gonna come back.
We come back
We
in
will.
2 weeks. Okay, all right.
on the 18th,
On the 18th.
18th, on the 18th.
right,
Voting on 3 items,
correct,
Yeah, we can vote on those.
20,000 for gas,
right,
10,000 for the aquarium,
that's right,
and 5,000
for the,
for Congress.
okay, all right,
We're voting on A and B at the same time?
Correct.
With those amendments?
right. All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Now, let's have it. Item 4 is hospitality budget, and if will of council, we can also take both of those. That's an amended 18 hospitality as well as a proposed 19 hospitality fee budget. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilman Shade.
On item 4B, the hospitality fee budget, I think we've got, I'm going to show on the right budget, 350 anniversary celebration for $75,000. That's correct.
There was a change on the 350th celebration, correct?
He's proposing one.
He's proposing a change.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
believe.
Okay, I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we have $75,000 allocated right now, is that correct?
For the 350th celebration, yes.
I would like to increase that by $50,000. And let me explain why we're doing that. The city has been approached by an organization called OC Sports. OC Sports owns a transatlantic race. This is a sailboat race, and they are on the same lines that we may think about as the race alone that we had many years ago in Charleston. This is a point-to-point race. They will leave from Plymouth, England, to Charleston, South Carolina. They are aware, and this is why their interest is in Charleston, they want to tie it into the 350 celebration. It is a race that will have these high-end transatlantic sailboats that will take part that will arrive in May of 2020. It's like a 7 to 10 day voyage. It'll be a staggered finish. This is on the heels of the announcement of British Airways having flights from London to Charleston, direct flights from London to Charleston. But this will put the celebration on the map as to what we're doing in Charleston. Their initial commitment from us, or request from us, is $150,000. However, we're allowed to, and we're working on the contract with this now, to have that an in-kind kind of sponsorship. So what they're looking for is our use of the facilities in Charleston to help sponsor this race, provide, for lack of a better word, a landing zone for these boats to come in, for us to host the finish line of this transatlantic. I can't tell you how much of an impact this is going to have on the economy of Charleston and how this is going to tie into the 350 celebration. We do have a surplus, if I am correct on this, with the way this budget, we have a $188,000 surplus as it stands right now. So I'm just wishing to earmark another $50,000 for this transatlantic flight, race. We're working on the contract. We'll get all those details worked out and hopefully have an official announcement. But this will just be the first stage in our commitment to this transatlantic boat race.
Councilor Gregory?
Can we take the same approach on this one as we did on the accommodation? Because there are some other recommendations here that I would like to shift. more specifically, as we look at the amount of funds that we're giving to the visitor center, both in accommodation and hospitality. At some point, I'd like to make a recommendation that some of those funds be shifted to Stonyfield. I'll give the exact amount at the next meeting. The next meeting.
What?
Can I?
Can you give it to me before the next meeting so
Yes,
we can have the budget?
Yes, I will. I will.
Councilor Seekings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and with all due respect to my colleague to my left, who is a wise man and has done lots of good work while he sits there, I'd like to think about this too, because these are funds that can be used for a number of different things, as opposed to the state accommodations tax, which is much more formulaic. And if you look through both our 2018 and 2019 budget, we've put these monies towards infrastructure, which is greatly needed in the city on both sides of the river. And the idea that we're going to go fund a bunch of people coming across water before we start addressing getting rid of water makes me a little nervous. So I just want to make sure that we're not losing an opportunity to do some infrastructure and flooding relief in exchange for something that may or may not be a great advantage to us, especially with the use of these funds, which can be used for infrastructure. So let's talk some more about it. Let's take a look at what that's all about and see how this all comes. I'd sort of like to wait on that too.
So let me ask where we're at real quick, because I believe Councilman Shea did make an amendment, I don't know that there was who made the motion?
I made the motion.
He made the motion, I'll wait, you got a second.
Second it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so there is a motion, a second. Is that acceptable to whoever made the motion initially, the amendment?
He made the motion.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, okay. All right. So, all right, well, there we are. Further discussion. Councilman Waring?
Well, thank you. I hadn't even raised my hand yet.
I knew you was coming.
Again, I agree with Councilmember Gregory. There are going to be some nuances here. If we could decide, meet between now and then and the 18th and have those changes. That's the first time I heard about this, 150,000 and 50,000, Councilman. It's the first time I heard that.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and I agree with Councilman Seekings. I mean, we've got a lot of priorities that we have to meet. So we've got more priorities than we have money. And most of it is already figured out, but these last few dollars, I think we need to have the best due diligence before we vote. So, I would hope we can make decisions on this on the 18th. Well, there's a motion on the floor. So.
Yeah.
Okay, but his motion and yours motion.
That's an amendment.
But Councilmember Mitchell and Councilmember Shealy made the initial motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They couldn't accept it anyway, so now we're back to their motion, is that what we're saying?
And their motion, was?
You're asking that they just do it next week.
Oh, okay, yeah. That was their motion?
Right.
So, all right.
Well, I seconded it so we could at least discuss the matter, and perhaps Councilmember Shea would agree to wait until we get a little more information
That's fine with me.
about this and come back to you. I will share that, and I apologize in the sense that I happen to also have been briefed on this potential event for Charleston, which during our 350th year anniversary, we do want to do some special things. And so we'll get that information out to everyone. I think this might be a worthwhile pursuit.
I'm going to recognize Ms. Warden. I think she had something she wanted to provide some insight. Ms. Warren, did you have something else you wanted to share with regard to
Because
that?
there's transfers into the general fund on this hospitality budget, so it affects the general fund. I just want to make sure everybody
Right.
understands that.
Councilman Shea, did you hear that?
Transfers into the general fund from the hospitality fund, so this budget affects the general fund budget.
So that surplus of 188
As long
is
as
going
you-
to balance the general fund budget. Anything you take away
No,
from it
well-
will have to come out of general fund budget.
Well, I'm just saying, we need to get a budget, is what I'm saying, basically. And we can't mess with the transfer in on the hospitality fund budget. So Susan tells me as long as we get the budget approved next week with the second and third reading of the general fund budget, we should be fine, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Madam Clerk?
read this through and then make any adjustments after we get our budget put in place.
So we have to have a budget next meeting. So I heard somebody say a meeting next week with all of council so we can talk about all of these things.
I mean, we can talk.
Okay.
Just a point of order. I think they made a motion to approve.
That was.
So that has to
That's
be
right.
rescinded or voted on, am I correct? That motion before we get to this next motion?
Well, they made an amendment.
You made an amendment?
His motion could be an amended, that's what I said initially. But he made the initial motion.
To approve.
His motion, seconded by the mayor, would have to be an amended.
I think either Councilmember Shea either has to withdraw his amendment, or you need to vote on it and then go back to the original.
Correct.
Councilman Shade?
Just make sure I'm understanding the procedure what we're doing. By withdrawing it, we keep the option available to take it up on the 18th.
Correct.
We'll make sure that option's still available.
Correct. We can take it up on the 18th for any amendments between now and, correct, okay. So the motion on the floor is to approve, and Councilman Lewis.
Couldn't those persons with these different amendments, can't they meet next week or so? Because you're really pushing them to get the final draft of the budget together. And they have to present a budget to us on the 18th. So we wouldn't want to be here discussing amendments and all that all night long. So they need to meet with the mayor and with staff to see if it's possible to do these amendments, hopefully next week.
Right.
Sometime by the end of this week, so we could be ready for the 18th.
And that would apply, to both the state accommodations and the hospitality.
Hospitality,
Right.
both.
All right.
We still need a motion to carry the budget.
Councilmember Mitchell and Sheila's motion.
Right.
He moved to approve item 4.
Right.
Councilmember Shealy seconded that motion. That's where we are.
All right. Did you have any comments, Mr.
Yes, I think we just need to wait until the 18th. So I'm going to withdraw my motion. I think we need to wait till the 18th and approve everything at one time. We are changing and changing and changing and changing everything, but we need to make sure that our finance director here knows exactly what we're doing. So you all need to get with them, and so we can do this budget and get it squared away.
We can't defer it because of the transfers into the general fund.
Right.
So
That's what I'm saying. So
yeah.
I just, but see, if I approve, when I vote this to approve what we have here, that what they're already presenting without any changes.
Still can amend it. We have to.
But we can amend,
amend it between now and the 18th.
Yeah, between now and the 18th to do it there.
I mean, even if we vote on the night, we
Right.
still have the right to amend.
Okay.
But we need to move it forward
now,
tonight
but the motion
because
I
we
made
have
is
to have it for the benefit of the general fund
Yeah,
budget.
I just make my motion just to approve it, and
All
then
right.
you can do amendment later on.
Right.
Floor is to approve.
Approve the hospitality, the way it is.
Right.
That's the motion I made, right?
Yes, you made the motion
To approve.
But if you approve it, now doesn't this only need one reading?
It does.
Right, but we would bring it back to amend it.
We still have the
We're
right.
going to bring it
We
back.
still
We'll
have the
bring
right
it back,
to amend.
we'll bring back an amended
Yeah,
budget,
they'll bring it
Vanessa.
back.
Okay.
All right. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5 is municipal accommodations fee ordinance, capital projects and operating expenses. Is there a motion?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 6 is the 2019 general fund.
Move for approval, 6
By all
and 7.
means. All right, so that's, the motion was to move, to take 6 and 7.
And we need a second of Councilmember.
I'll second it.
You can't.
Oh,
I make the motion, he'll second.
I'll make the motion and
Councilman
second.
Waring.
Right, he made the motion, but I need a second.
Oh,
Take it together? Yeah.
Okay.
okay. All right.
On the floor?
It is now on the floor. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of council. First, I want to take just a minute and thank for prayer, Councilmember Waring, was so appropriate to thank our fine staff that has worked so hard this year on the whole budget process. And I would like for them to stand and be recognized. In addition to Amy Wharton, Kathy Mercer, and Deb Jenkins, and Andrew Jones. Please stand. Joanna Szynski, Stephanie Dellinger, and of course Matt Foley as well. Y'all thank these folks. Mostly for putting up with us. Thank y'all. And I want to thank once again the Budget Committee and the Budget Committee process. I feel like it really was the most transparent and participatory budget process that we've seen in the city, and everybody's analysis and input, particularly when we looked at the departmental budgets, was as detailed as this council has ever seen. That being said, it's a real, no pun intended, balancing act to come up with our city budget, and not just the balancing between the liabilities and the revenue, but balancing the growing demands of this vibrant city, now the largest city by population in the state of South Carolina, to provide our essential services, including police and fire, but so many other responsibilities that we have. And alongside of that, the existential threat that we now face with flooding and sea level rise. So despite all that, and again, this is a tribute to our staff, but also to our council. We've recently gotten ratings from both Standard & Poor and Moody's. We have AAA credit ratings from both of those rating agencies. And I'll point out a quote from Standard & Poor that maybe this isn't that hard to believe with deficit spending that we see at the federal level, but quote, "The city can maintain better credit characteristics than the United States government in a stress scenario." So maybe that's not that high a bar to meet, but
shoot a little higher. Yes, right.
Standard & Poor's gives us a better credit rating than the federal government. I feel that's pretty nice. So on the revenue side, we do have a diverse funding stream. I know there's a lot of focus on property taxes, and there should be, but most folks don't know that that only accounts for 45% of our funding for the City of Charleston general fund budget. We have developed over time, as state law allows, a pretty diverse funding stream. And with the effect of local option sales tax, which this city, to the extent allowed by law, fully rebates, so to speak, to our property tax payers, our homeowners, there's actually a reduction year to year of the net millage because we're getting credits for sales tax revenue that's being credited to your property tax bill. Not a lot of folks know that. But if you look at your tax bill, and I've got mine right here, the City of Charleston has a millage rate of 78.1 plus 4 for drainage improvements plus 1.5 for public safety infrastructure. So what's that, about 83.6 mils. But the net effect of your tax bill from the City of Charleston after the municipal sales tax credit that we give back, so to speak, is only 62 mils. 62 mils, even though it's stated on the bill at 84, you get that credit. And so when you compare us to other cities around us, like North Charleston, who does not give back that local option sales tax, their net millage is 75 mils. So actually considerably higher than the City of Charleston. So between our diversity of funding and our use of local option sales tax, our net millage isn't really that bad. And we have in the last year, in fact, one of the items on our agenda tonight is to adjust fees for our planning department and our TRC fees. So like we did last year with our inspection fees, we are striving to keep that property tax percentage as low as possible and increase our funding streams from other places. So I'm proud to submit this budget to council tonight. It's balanced both in terms of debits and credits. That is required, but it takes some doing to get that. But it's also balanced in terms of the delivery of our essential services to our citizens without overbearingly, reaching out for an additional tax increase to our citizens. There is some very modest tax increase, 1.5 mils for the building specifically of more fire stations, public safety infrastructure that's needed in this growing city. Our fire department has determined we don't have enough coverage on the Cainhoy Peninsula given the growth that was approved years ago for that part of our city. Johns Island has been growing. We only have one fire station there. We need another fire station there. So that's a most reasonable request. In addition, the budget that will come to you in 2 weeks for our stormwater fee will also include, as it did for this year, a $2 increase in the stormwater fee that's collected on everybody's water bill that you pay monthly. So two different increases I think is justified, it's reasonable, it's needed, and it doesn't break the backs of anyone, particularly given the fact that we get this credit from the local option sales tax. In addition, we've got a number of additional personnel that we're adding this year because our budget did grow just from the natural growth of the city. We're adding a recruiter to our fire department. We're adding 2 assistant fire marshals. We really needed to beef up our fire marshal and inspections department. We're adding 4 mechanics to our shop, which we've been getting behind on getting repairs, and that was starting to impact our service with our fleet. And it was also driving up costs because we were having to send so many vehicles to outside vendors. So we actually hope to save money with our outside vendors by hiring additional mechanics. We're adding another position with our livability and tourism department. We're adding a senior construction project manager for capital projects. We've got so many things going on that we're trying to build and repair in the city that we needed more management for that department. We're adding a painter, some more personnel for parks maintenance. And when you see the budget in 2 weeks, of course, we'll talk about that, but we're adding a number of personnel in our stormwater budget. So we've been very transparent. There are a lot of other needs from the departments that did not get met. We had to make some tough decisions about that because we couldn't fund everything. We had lots of input from particularly from the budget committee, a lot of discussion, particularly about funding a pay increase for our employees. It's well needed and deserved. Again, Councilmember Waring, your prayer was so appropriate. They're here every day, in and out, serving our citizens. So this budget includes a cost of living increase for our non-sworn employees. It raises the minimum wage for the lowest paid employees of the city, and then admittedly, beginning July 1, it puts into place a revised pay plan for our non-sworn employees. And just to explain to everyone, we adjusted our pay plan for both the police and fire departments over the last 3 years. So those pay plans have already been adjusted, but we had not done an adjustment for our non-sworn employees. So this gets us on a good path there. So I'm very proud that without a lot of tax increase, we've met essential needs of a growing city, and it's a balanced budget. So I know there's been a lot of discussion both at the committee and at our workshop meeting. So I will share with council and you, Mr. Chairman, that despite my being proud of this budget, I will accept amendments, because I know at our workshop there was a lot of discussion about other ideas that could possibly improve the budget, but we are open for amendments if someone would like to make one.
Councilman Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to reiterate and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for a very good process that you put in place. I mean, we met for the better part of 6 months. It is an arduous process, but I think not only members of the ad hoc committee, but I believe every council member around this table is much more informed as a result of the open process and transparent process you put in place. Agree with just about everything you said, and as you know, the differences, and I'd like to ask my colleague if he will accept an amendment to the budget to amend the budget to the ad hoc committee's budget that was presented during our workshop on last week. The basic difference in these budgets, basically, I mean, we have some small nuances, but the basic difference is the employee pay raises, as you know, Mr. Mayor, starts on January 1 in the ad hoc committee's budget. Now, it does require an additional $1.5 million increase to be able to pay for that pay raise for our employees beginning January 1, 2019 versus your budget that begins July 1, 2019. It is good to pray for our employees, because they are our most, and I know you agree with this, important asset in the city. All the historical sites, without the people to run them, if this community wasn't safe, this community was unclean and unkept from our sanitation workers, if our parks were risky places to go, and if our fire people didn't show up on time, those are the basic things a city has to do for the citizenry. So the basic difference in these two budgets are employees' salary pay raises beginning January 1. Now, I'd like to go a step further and include, in particular, fringe benefits when it comes to payroll. When you contribute to payroll, also the employee contributes more towards retirement, and so does the city. That differential, that 6 months differential, employees will never make up. So every man, woman, and not child, because we don't employ children, but every man and woman that works for the city of Charleston, if this pay raise starts July 1 versus January 1, incrementally, the retirement check down the road will be small. And you say, well, there's a way we can make that up. We cannot make that up for employees. So they're deserving of it. I know you agree. But at the end of the day, if people want to run against us because we gave some of the best employees in any city in the country a pay raise because it starts January 1 versus July 1, I invite the competition. It is the right thing to do. So with that, I yield the floor. Thank you.
Councilman
You won't. I accept the amendment. Now I'm going to say something.
All right, I'll go to Councilman Moody, then I'll come back to Councilman Lewis.
Yeah, I just want to make 2 points. I support what you said, Councilman Waring. They won't object to a 1.5 mil increase, considering because of the local option sales tax, that will be rolled back fairly soon, so they won't really have an increase. But what we're dealing with in HR is in our non-sworn employees, we've got somewhere in the neighborhood, and there's some argument whether it's 19 or 17 or some other percentage, but there's a big turnover rate. And nowhere in this budget does that cost show up that you can identify. Training, all kinds of other things that go on, you know, lost efficiency, people having to do other people's work because things are not going right. That 18% is very troubling to me. What we're doing here, if you think about it for a minute, this increase that we're talking about, the total increase on an annual basis is about $3 million. And what we're doing is we're funding half of that at 1.5 mils. So we're taking on a liability of $3 million and we only got $1.5 million to pay for that. Well, come next January, unless we're going to roll this back or get rid of some people, we're then going to be faced with paying for this. And to me, you shouldn't be spending money you don't have. And that's really, maybe that's just the difference between a philosophy of a bookkeeper and a piano player, but that's my philosophy, is that we shouldn't be doing that. And so I am very supportive of increasing that millage and making those raises effective January the 1st. That's what the ad hoc committee, and quite frankly, you're right, Councilmember Waring, and everything you said about the budget is correct. All those things we talked about, but we went into a lot of detail, and it really came down to our budgets are exactly the same. We ended up adding that 1.5 mil, which is basically $1,650,000, and that's our budget is over by $1,660,000, and we have identified 5 items that are really one-time expenditures, like the timekeeping software. There's 2 IT products in there. We weren't able to fund all of the TNT improvements. We funded 117, we deferred 78, and then the salary savings based on our vacancy. But those amounts there, if our staff is correct, and I'm going to bet on our staff, we're going to have a surplus in 2018. And if we do, with that surplus, we can still fund some of these items that we're deferring. We're deferring them until we have the money to do it. So my suggestion is people are really not going to care about a 1.5 mil increase, and particularly if we roll it back. They will care if we don't pick up their garbage. They will care if we don't have the recreation departments open. They will care about a lot of things, and this is really for the non-sworn staff. This is not the fire, not the police. We dealt with them last year. It's time for us to deal with the other folks this year. So I'm going to support that motion to support the ad hoc budget.
Councilman Lewis?
And I wouldn't beat a dead horse to death since y'all have said what I'm going to say, but I think we need to give these employees a pay raise starting in January. We look at the paper all the time. I mean, we get these great acolytes in the paper. Our magazine, Charleston, is the most livable city, a friendly city. But if we didn't have the employees that we got a certain group of employees. They do nothing but cobblestone sidewalks. They don't get paid much to do that. You got these employees that when these electrical companies, these different companies come and tear these streets up or tear these sidewalks up, they can't set the curbings back on the sidewalk. Our people from the street and sidewalks have to go and do that professional work. If they were working for some big company, a brick mason or something, they'd probably be making $20, $25, $30 an hour. So we don't pay these people, but they make us look good. To be the friendliest city, they make us look good. And I think that we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we don't approve this budget and give these employees a raise in January. We'll be saying to these employees, we don't care whether you pick up the garbage or not. Because we know if we don't pick it up, those folks down south of Broadway, they're going to call, and the mayor's going to feel the heat. We're not going to feel the heat, because we're not in City Hall every day. But he's going to feel the heat when these people say, well, my garbage can't get picked up. And I can tell you right now, I live on Sumter Street. The average garbage truck that goes in, they pass my house either on the Cummings Street side or the King Street side. Some of these men and women, especially during the summer, they go to work 7 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes they out there 8 and 9 o'clock getting the garbage out the street, cleaning up those weeds and these trees and leaves and stuff. We have some dedicated, hard-working employees. And the majority of our employees have been there 20, 25 years or more. So we need to take care of these employees. These employees, it's a shame when somebody says, well, I'm going to work for North Charleston, I'm going to work for Charleston County, doing the same work and making more. Recycling last year took like 6 or 7 hour people driving the truck, picking up that green can, that blue can, making more money than they're making picking up that green can, and they don't have to smell on that blue can what you smell of that green can. So I think we need to take care of these employees. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilman Shade, then I'll come back to Councilman Mitchell.
I'll defer to Councilman.
Okay, Councilman Mitchell.
My colleagues, I agree with everything that's said here, even with the mayor's budget. But like I told everyone before, that I have to go with the 3 mills. I have to give these employees a raise. I know what they're going through. I meet with them every day on the streets, because I'm out there on the streets every day. Out on the streets, not in my house, not sitting behind a desk. I'm out on the streets, and I hear them complaining. And this was not just yesterday. This was years. And I said, now we come to the point, now that we can give them something, a raise, which is not much, because to me it's about the $15, but it's going to be $12 or whatever the case may be, but that's still not enough, because if you look at what's happening with the economy in the city of Charleston now, they can't stay here anyway, you know. But we got to give them something that they can feel comfortable and working for the city of Charleston. You work with your employer, you get more out of them. Your employees get more, you get more work out of them when you give them some incentive and give them a raise as such when they were asking for this for years. And that's, Mayor, that's before you came. This was talking about before Mayor John Tettenberg came here. We were talking about raises, but we never did it. But now we have to bite the bullet and do it. We need these employees to work. Like I tell people every day, this is my home. I didn't come here. This is my home. I grew up here. In the 50s, in the 60s, I left here, sure, went to New York and went to school, graduated from NYU, but came back home. It's changed. But even with the change, it's not changing for the low-line people that's working here. I got a daughter, she can't even live. My daughter's paying $950 a month right now in an apartment right off Azalea Drive. 3 kids, 1 at Tech, 1 in 10th grade, 1 in 11th grade at Burke. But that's what she's paying, but she's working 2 jobs just to make it. So, you know, I understand these things, so we have to work with our employees here. We have to do it. This is not something we want to do, this is a must. And they're calling out and crying for our help, and we are here. So we have to do these things. People look and say, oh, don't worry about them. Yes, we have to worry about them. I'm not going to pick up a garbage can. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be a parking enforcement officer. I'm not going to do it. So we need them to work. They keep this city going. If you come out and walk the streets with me sometime at night, when Councilman Lewis and I walk on these streets at night, walking the east side, walking King Street, walking Cannon Street, walking Bogart Street, you see what happens. You need these employees here. These people are complaining and they want it done. So it's our job to do it. So if we have to raise the tax, we have to bite the bullet on it. And I'll bite the bullet on it because they need to have it done. I'm just tired hearing the cry out and we're not doing nothing. So that's why I was telling my colleagues, I'll go with the 3 mills all day long. And I'll bite the bullet from it. I'm not worried about that. I said, we explain to the community why we are doing what we are doing and let them know that they'll understand. And that's the way I feel about it.
Councilor Griffin? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Councilor Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we're talking about doing this evening is raising 3 mil increase on someone's tax bill. And that has a profound impact on people who own property. And all of us, I think at this table, own property in the city of Charleston. So it has a direct impact on not just our constituents, but on us as well. And we can't take this lightly. We can't just sit back and throw out numbers of 1.5 mil or 3 mil increase. That has a real impact on folks. As Councilmember Mitchell was talking about, people who've got to have 2 jobs to support themselves and their families. And so this is not something we can take lightly. And the comments have been coming around and the literature we've seen on our desk tonight. Property taxes are regressive. I mean, it's like someone mentioned to me earlier, it's like another mortgage on your residence. And all that is true. I mean, that's true. And with that backdrop, we had to understand what we're doing, and I know we do, and how the impact that a 3 mil increase is going to have on folks. But we've got to do it. Half of this increase, 1.5 mil increase, provides, as the mayor mentioned earlier, for public safety, fire stations. Our number one priority in this city is public safety. We've got to have fire stations. We've got to have fire stations. If we don't provide fire protection to our citizens or police protection to our citizens, what are we doing as a city? And unfortunately, that goes into part of this increase, and it's going to affect people's property taxes. But we've got to have that fire truck and man that station. It costs, I think Ms. Wharton told me at one point, $1 million a year per company per station. $1 million a year per company per station. That's a heavy expense, but that is our responsibility. And so as stewards of the public funds and public safety, those are things we have to do. Back when these storms were hitting Charleston and the governor proclaimed that we have to do an evacuation, at the old Piggly Wiggly site, we had one of those drop-off spots for sandbags. I was out there every day working with the folks who were out there. And these were the folks who were at members of Public Works. These were the folks from Recreation. And we're all rolling up our sleeves out there filling sandbags. Because there were a lot of people who could not physically do that on their own. That's not their normal job. Recreation people, employees, normally are not there to fill sandbags. But they were out there, not complaining one bit. They were out there helping our public, helping those who couldn't help themselves. And we talked about the value of our employees, and we think about just the trash collection. Think about the folks who we call when there's a flood or a rain on July 20th in which water's coming to people's homes. If we can't reach out to the folks at Public Works to come respond, or stormwater to respond to that, because they take the day off, they take a furlough day, how is the public going to respond to us when we can't get somebody out there to respond to a flooding issue or a drainage issue? Those are our people who we're dealing with. Those are the people we've got to support. One of the breakfasts that we had for the Human Resources has created an appreciation for our long-term employees. I was at a table with them one of those breakfasts, and I asked them, I said, just by a show of hands, fellas, how many of you live in the city of Charleston? Not one. Not one person at that table could afford to live in the city of Charleston. That's how the cost of living has increased so dramatically that those folks, the same people I talked about, who are filling sandbags, they live in Hanahan, Goose Creek, North Charleston, Charleston Heights, Allendale, Andrews. They're commuting regularly to get to their jobs in Charleston. So half of this 3 mil increase is to fully fund that pay raise that we've been talking about. Fully fund that pay raise. It goes into effect in a couple of days, January 1st, 2019. For those people I just described to you. And it's just, when we do this, including what the cost of living increases, what we're doing, we're just leveling the field. We're not giving them an extra bonus. We're leveling the field to what other municipalities and governments are paying like employees. So echoing what Councilman Waring said, you want to argue with me and disagree with me, because several of us are up for re-election this coming next year. I will defend this, because basically and finally, it's just the right thing to do. It is a moral thing to do. It is the right thing to do. And this is our responsibility. This is called leadership. Our responsibility to say to the citizens of Charleston, this is why we're doing it and why. Thank you.
Councilman Griffin.
First, I want to thank the mayor. Again, I think we can all thank him. He's done an amazing job at putting this budget together. We're arguing over maybe 0.1% of the budget. Everything else is great. And I remember a year ago, I was sitting up there as a councilman-elect looking down on y'all and saying, how on earth did they come up with this? And honestly, it's hard work. That's all it is. It's hard work at this table. It's hard work by him. It's hard work by all of our employees. And I mean, just what he's addressing, Cane Hoy and Johns Island fire stations, those are two areas that are booming right now in growth. And they need more fire safety. And you talk about raising the minimum wage for the city, and you know, I am young. I just bought my first home not long ago in the city of Charleston. And I can remember a couple years ago, fresh out of college, I was working for minimum wage as a side job. And I understand the city's minimum wage is a lot higher than what, you know, federally mandated minimum wage is, but you're almost embarrassed sometimes to look at your paycheck. It's so small, and you're wondering at night how you're going to pay your bills. And it's not a good feeling to ever have. And if we can give our wonderful employees an opportunity to make a little bit more, and really, like we've all said, they're not doing their normal jobs. They're going above and beyond every day. I mean, if you look at the number of employees we have and the number of services we offer, they're having to wear many hats. And, you know, we have to take a team approach. We have to make people be proud to be employees of the city of Charleston. And this is an opportunity to do that. And that's why I fully support the ad hoc's recommendation. You know, like we've all said, we will defend it. And we could talk about 1.5 mils, 3 mils, but when it breaks down to, correct me if I'm wrong, annual tax bill, if you add A and B, you're talking about $42 a year. $42 a year. On a $400,000 home.
4%.
Right. Right. If you're a 4% home buyer, that means it's your primary residence in the city of Charleston. I know myself, I know everybody around this table, I know you would be willing to sacrifice, you know, that $42 a year. That means one less meal out. That means one less new pair of shoes. I don't know, whatever it is, whatever your vice is. A pack of cigarettes.
No shoes. One shoe.
One
You only
shoe.
get one shoe.
Shoelace.
But what I'm saying is, I know it seems like a lot, but to me it isn't. I think it's worth it. And if you look at our citizens and you say, hey, can you sacrifice $30 to $40 next year? And that means that we're going to have the great services that we have now and probably a little bit more, because our people's morale is going to go up. They know that the city cares about them, us. We care about them. It's our job to make sure that our people that work for the city of Charleston are taken care of, and make sure that they don't feel like they would be better suited somewhere else. So this is, you know, we have to do this. And for my generation, you know, it's important, because now we can maybe reach out to some more people and say, hey, come work for the city of Charleston. We're going to look out for you. And get some new younger people in to train from our wonderful staff that we already have. But we've got some positions that need to be filled, and we want to be more competitive in terms of the other municipalities.
Councilor Shealy?
Thank you, Chairman. And I also want to thank the mayor, thank Amy and her staff and everybody for all the work that you've done. A couple of months ago, I was sitting in an HR committee meeting, and we were going through people who have left the city and why and those types of things, and there were several of them that I had recognized, but one in particular came up on that screen that really got to me. And it's a young gentleman that works real hard, that had worked real hard in our storm drains and those types of things, had worked particularly hard in the Church Creek Basin. And this is a guy that, man, we needed to put down some riprap on somebody's home. He was going to be carrying these large boulders, putting them in wheelbarrows and dumping them. And I mean, the work this guy did was incredible. It was incredible work. That gentleman is now working for another government entity in the local area. Now, this isn't a high-skilled job, but it's going to cost us a lot more money to find the next guy to come in and replace him than it would have been had we had that salary a little bit higher. So that's why we need to have salaries raised as soon as possible, and January 1 is what the ad hoc budget has, and so I'm in favor of that. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I would like to share that music and math are really both
There is a convergence.
connected.
I understand that.
Yeah.
4 points.
So, and I would respectfully say, like this year, we did have, just from our natural growth, quite a few $1 million additional in the budget because of enhanced property values in the city, and that I would expect to happen again next year. So, yes, we're taking on an additional expense, but, we should have some additional revenue as well. So, but I certainly get your point. Now, for clarification, and I might, I don't want to belabor this, but just so we're clear, and it may involve asking Councilmember Waring to accept an amendment to his amendment, but I think the clear intent is to make the key difference between this amendment and the mayor's budget to be the $1.5 million and moving up the timeline of the second pay raise for next year from July 1 to January 1. Just a matter of timing, what happened was after the Budget Committee finished its business, by the time I got to presenting to y'all at the workshop the mayor's budget, it included just a few modifications on the expense side. They weren't very much, but it included things just instead of emergency management assistant, $21,000 more for a sustainability director to work with Mark Wilbert. Their department works mostly on flooding and drainage issues, and so I just felt like that position was a little more needed next year, and we're there to support Shannon Scaff and emergency management whenever something comes up, I assure you. And then we didn't fund it last year, but Gianna in our housing community development wanted to include $25,000 to go to Charleston Dorchester Mental Health. They have a full-time employee that helps us with the homeless issue. Thirdly, half a year to go ahead and hire someone as prescribed in our apology for slavery, a racial reconciliation coordinator. So those few items got added by the time I got to you at the workshop. And in addition to the reductions that you've mentioned, Councilmember Moody, I had added at that point a couple of more, or suggested a couple more deductions, one being similar to what you had mentioned, things that we are capital expenses really, rather than recurring expenses. The computer equipment for the forensics lab, which really won't go into service until 2020, that we add that to one of those items that we'll pay for with the reserve. And then we did recommend $50,000 to come off of the vehicle repair budget, because as I mentioned before, we should save some money by having these 4 extra mechanics. We added a potential $500,000 worth of expenses to vehicle repair, so I'm asking to shave that back down to $450,000. Now the bottom line is, we're all watching out for us. Amy has those few items both on the expense and the credit side, so that at the end of the day, if you would accept this adjustment to your amendment, that the amended budget would in fact reflect everything that was in my original budget to you, including those couple of extra credits in order to make everything balanced. But those were the main items that came along.
You want to respond, Councilman Waring, first? Since
I would. Because we need 3 readings on this, and I was trying to keep up with the numbers on that, but it sounds like it's a figure of around $200,000. That's right. Out of a $220 million budget. Right. I definitely think there's a way we can work around that, but if we could pass this motion being consistent as with the A tax and the H tax, I'm sure we can get together next week or later on this week and work through those differences.
For second reading?
Yeah,
Are y'all okay with
second.
that? I would be.
Amy, do you want to respond to that? She would.
I have 3 balanced budgets and 3 ordinances, so I'm ready for whatever. That's what I'm saying.
That's a good example.
That's what I'm talking about right there.
Great employee.
Yeah, I was going to address what the mayor said, because he and I did talk about a couple of these things. In particular, the items that I listed, the 5 items for capital in nature, the one-time expenses, that's not inclusive. I mean, we could add anything to that. I mean, that was just what we did. Those items that you talked about, the salaries, I think we did talk about those in the ad hoc committee, and because they were on our list, and we excluded those and said we took those out specifically. But I don't have any problem if we can figure out a way to pay for them to coming back in. My problem is I don't want to incur an expense that I'm not paying for. And so what you were saying was, if we can find the money, then I'm willing to, kind of what Councilman Waring said.
Well, we found the money, obviously, because she says they're all balanced.
Right. So anyway, so if we give, I'm in agreement. If we can give this budget first reading, and we can work on a little bit more and come back for the second, third reading, I'm good.
Good. All right. Councilman Gregory?
We've been sitting here talking about how great our staff is, but I think that in addition to providing them with additional salary increase, it's important for us to make sure that they have the tools necessary in order to do their job. So the Gregory Jackson budget, which is also balanced, is about trying to make sure that most of what staff requested for training, for innovation, for additional staffing, okay, will only cost another $14 a month. I mean a year, $14 more, okay? Not sure if we have the votes for it, but I think that if we are going to be consistent, particularly as it relates to staff, then I think we need to also make sure that this budget gives them the tools and the training necessary for them to be even better employees. Increasing salary is fine. I'm all for it. And we've always been for it. And the Gregory Jackson budget does that. But we're arguing that for an additional $1 million, $14 more a year on a property that's $400,000, and instead of just kicking this can down the road, let's just do this thing one time. And if we are in fact honoring our staff, then let's honor and respect their requests in order for them to do their jobs more effectively. And that's the Gregory Jackson budget and difference between the mayor's budget and the ad hoc committee budget. Because I don't think that we should balance this budget on the backs of our employees. But in the same, I think we need to make sure that they have the tools necessary to carry out the mandates of this city.
Councilor Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Chairman and Mayor, and I totally agree with everything that everyone else has said, and encouraging us to take the right vote for First of all, rewarding the staff by an increase in pay that I personally believe, in looking at some of the statistics that the Human Resources and our NOVAC group used to help us get to that understanding of doing the right thing by their pay. You know, we really do have time to make up for, and I totally agree that we need to start paying the staff at the level that we all think is the best we can do, and we're proud to do it, beginning on January 1. And I did want to just make sure that you clarified, Mayor, because I think you said something about the minimum wage increase, and then you said, and then we'll begin the pay plan in July. And actually, under your budget, the minimum wage would not begin until July either. That's my understanding. So just to clarify, I think we're past that. I think we're definitely going to support the budget that begins all of the pay and the cost of living on January 1. I can't say it any better than Councilmember Gregory. I really appreciate your support, Councilmember. I think I was accurately described in the newspaper article by Ms. Darlington today about the variety of budget options that we've been discussing, by saying that I am on one spectrum of philosophically choosing to think that we can't just begin with the premise that taxes are bad. I know that we've got a lot of voices in our ears about the eminent right of property tax owners to keep their money and all of that, but they live in our city. They travel on our roads. They play in our parks. You know, they walk on our sidewalks. They get their trash picked up. I mean, I just really cannot agree or appreciate that kind of attitude that you're a citizen and you get everything for free, or it should be balanced on the inadequate amounts that we have coming in from our other fees and revenues and taxes, which fluctuate. And yes, property taxes probably will go up again next year, Mayor, but I do think that, you know, in the future, these are going to be harder decisions for us to make, to add $14 for 1 year of a value that gives us $1.5 million of serving our expert employees and the requests that they've made to us in great detail, with great passion, with great intelligence. And some of these requests have been in front of you all in earlier years, and they're still, you know, on the cutting room floor. And my training in management is basically the nuts and bolts of operations and facilities. And basically, you value the people who serve those purposes, and the tools and the ability, the capacity that you can provide for them to have the best that you can provide, so that they can do the best job that they recommend to us. And I think what they gave to us is a sincere effort, their absolute best advice, and we should be taking it. And I think for $14, as Councilmember Griffin said, you know, $56 or $42 is one shoe. It's not even a nice night out in Charleston. $14 is, you know, a lunch at McDonald's. So I really think, I know I quoted the Post and Courier story that was about Black Friday shopping and how everybody turned out, and everyone is going to spend more money in their holiday shopping this year than in years past, because the economy is roaring and people are feeling like they've got the money. And I think that they would not mind if we gave them it's like 20 innovation items, 10 new staff, the training. I feel very strongly about training the people that are working for us. They are begging to be better at their jobs. Why would we want to turn that down? And individually, these are small numbers, but when you add them up, it's $1.5 million of improvements that we have the opportunity to give to our staff this year, based on the fact that we're being blessed by an economy like we haven't seen and even before the recession. So I know Councilmember Moody was trying to comfort me the other day by saying, when you look at all these little items, you know, just supplies. I mean, some of the staff just need, supplies. They need a file cabinet to put all the documents in. They need to have $10,000 worth of scanning so that they don't have to deal with paper ever again. And Mr. Moody was trying to comfort me and say, well, when it's little numbers like that, everybody's able to sort of squeeze out what they want by the end of the year. But that's the same thing for overtime. We pay a lot of overtime because we have a lot of unforeseen hours that we require of our employees to go through the emergencies and the weather events and all the other extracurricular things that the city brings in, hoping to have a great, parade here and a great party here and a great event here. And that requires overtime. And we don't budget for overtime. That's the rule I learned. So we expect them to find overtime in basically not spending on something that's in their budget so that they can pay their employees to work the hours that are required so that we get the services that we are expecting from our city staff. So yes, little items add up. I think they provide the quality and the confidence. It's an assurance factor that we are here, we've got their backs, we appreciate their work, we want to pay them well, and we want to give them the tools that they need to do a good job for us. And that's what I would ask, that we increase this millage to one more point, however we express it, bring it up to 4, add $14 to the $400,000 property 4% homeowner, and I don't know how to do that legally, so I'm looking to my colleague, Councilmember Gregory, or anyone else who would like to help me, but I do think that vote should be on the table for everyone to be able to speak to, and thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor Gregory?
If we decided on 4 mills, that would be problematic in carrying this budget through in a timely manner, am I correct? Because we didn't advertise it at that level?
Well, we'd have to probably go line by line and add back all the items that you want to add back. We'd have to do that tonight, I think, or we're going to end up in special meetings, and we have to advertise 15 days.
Yeah.
So we'd have to do it tonight, right, Susan? We'd have to do it tonight.
I thought we advertised up to 4 mil.
We did.
We did, but it's the budget itself, because it has to be a balanced budget.
Right.
So you'd have to add back all so it balances.
All right. Didn't you do that with the budget that we gave you?
I did not, because that was a lot of things to add back. Which, I could have done that, but then it might not be what you all wanted me to add back. So then we would have been here all night anyway, so I left it.
Councilor Seekins?
I'd like to speak briefly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, and fellow members of council. I agree with exactly half of what's been said around here today, and that is, and I think I said it from the get-go, I wasn't going to vote for any budget that didn't have a full-year increase to our employees going forward. I mean, I think, sort of back to Government 101, who are we? We're the people who work for the city. We need to make sure we retain them. The one thing that I learned during this budget process, and I do think having the committee was educational. I think we learned a lot. I think there's a lot we can learn going forward next year, too. But I learned that we had an 18% turnover rate in our non-sworn employees in the city of Charleston for the last 5 years. That's unbelievable. I mean, I was really taken aback by that. And there's a number of reasons for it, but it's a very high number. It means in 5 years, we lose just about 100% of our employees, and it all comes back to pay. So we need to get to a place where we pay our employees the rate which they're due. We'll never get to that level, but the rate which they feel the work that they should in their job and want to stay here as a career forever. Right? So that's a basic premise. And all of budgeting and everything we do should have some basic premises in it and should have some long-range planning in it. I mean, and I think one of the things that maybe we missed the opportunity this year, and I hope we don't do it next year, is to come up with a set of principles, beliefs, and premises as we build the budget. And, think about it this year. Public safety is our #1 priority in the city. If public safety is, and we have some deficiencies in public safety, which apparently we do, then put in there we need 2 fire stations. Employee retention, a raise. Let's make sure that's part of our premises. Infrastructure, both political infrastructure and infrastructure for our city, including flooding. Put it in there. Affordability of housing. I mean, and we've got a bond out there that's waiting to go that actually isn't in our budget this year. And build those as premises and then build our budget. When I first got elected to city council in 2010, y'all remember what our budget was in 2010? It was $135 million. This year, it's going to be somewhere between $222 and $224 million. It's gone up $100 million in 10 years, 8 years. That's significant. That shows that we're growing. One of the things that was not part of this conversation, and I regret that now, is budgeting around the natural growth of our budget. And we didn't do that this year. And I wonder where we missed that opportunity. And one of the things that strikes me as I sit here tonight, and it struck me as I've really thought about this and looked through all this, there just seems to be some assumption that an employee pay raise or a couple of fire stations have to be tied to a property tax increase. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, we've had natural growth. What do we do with that money? Have we reinvested it back into our city? So raising employee pay on the backs of a 1.5 mil tax increase, and I know Councilmember Shade said he was in a room where none of the employees that were there lived in the city, but if they live in the city, that money's going immediately back in property taxes. Because I will tell you, I've heard all this about $45 and $400,000 at 4%. That's a small percentage of the people paying property taxes. And our employees who live here and work here don't live in $400,000 homes and likely are renting. And if you're renting in a property that's a 6%. And if we raise property taxes on all those apartments that are getting built out there today, and our employees and other people who can't afford $400,000 homes live in them, guess what's happening to them? Immediately. Their rent's going up. Because the property owner is not going to absorb a 6%, 1.5, 3 mil, 4 mil property tax increase, especially looking around at all the other prosperity in the city. So I desperately want to get to a place where we have a budget where we give a raise to our employees starting January 1st. Retention has got to be there. But I don't buy into the premise that it has to naturally and inexorably be tied to a property tax increase. Because it affects people who can't afford $400,000 homes, small businesses. Small businesses that get creamed with property tax increases. Mr. Mayor, you pointed out that we raise 45% of our budget from property taxes. What's the next biggest piece? Business license fees. That's the next. So small business that owns their own business getting creamed, and we just keep hitting them as we keep growing. It's an unsustainable model. Now we're going to take up in 2 weeks our stormwater fee budget. There's going to be a proposition that we increase the stormwater fee $2. That's no secret, it's coming. That's a much fairer way to do it, because that hits everybody. The property tax doesn't hit everybody, but the people it hits, especially those who don't own their house, live in 6%, get hit worse. So I worry about the process of going through and building a budget with just the assumption and presumption that we have to have a property tax increase tied to, among other things, an employee raise, which if you live in the city, the minute we give you the raise, is going to get sucked back into your living expenses, period. It just is. So I'm thinking about all this, and I'm listening, but somewhere between 222 and 224 million is going to be a property tax increase without using the natural growth of our budget to fund some of the things like an employee raise. I'm not sure we've done our best homework and done our best work to get there, so I have some concern about it. Thank you.
Councilor Moody?
A little bit, I pretty much agree with most of everything that Councilmember Seeking said. The one big flaw, he says, where's all this growth going? I'll tell you where it's going. It's going to TIFs downtown. All right? I mean, that's where the money's going. That's where the growth is, and all that tax increase that's coming on is having to be spent within those TIFs. And that's where the growth is in terms of the value. It's not being spread across the city equally, and as you would think, if your values are going up, that everybody would share in it. That's not true. Now, what we haven't done, and I agree with you, is we have not projected forward and said, okay, when are those TIFs going to come off? We just had one that did come off, and they're set up for 25 years or something like that, and it's going to be many years before some of that money is available to balance this thing. And so that might be where we can bring back some property relief when that money starts coming back in. It doesn't have to be spent to pay back bonds or whatever that TIF generates. That's missing concept that you talk about, but we've got to do that. We've got to look forward, and I agree completely with you. We've got to set our priorities, and we got deferred maintenance around this city that's it's incredible. We got a problem.
Let me go to Councilman Jackson and then come back to the mayor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate everything that you've said, Mr. Seekins, in terms of educating us about the opportunities to find revenue in other with other sources. And you said two things that I have my own thoughts about. First one is the rental pass-throughs. I agree with that most property owners, if they're 6% investors, they're landlords of whatever nature, big, small, and in between, they are not absorbing any increases if it's in their lease to be able to pass them through. But that's a very, very small pass-through compared to everything we know about rents rising in the whole Charleston region. People are going to be paying more rent regardless. So I think that is, it's a fair point, but I don't think it's the main point about why we would not ask of ourselves and our citizens to increase. And a $400,000 house is still far above the average. So most people won't even have the $56 that Councilmember Gregory and I are proposing that accumulates with the three budgets that we're speaking about. So yes, it's going to be an increase, and yes, it'll be something that we're going to have to explain and be proud about. But I don't think that that's going to be a true problem to anyone property owner. The other thing you talked about was natural growth, and I totally agree that, we've made strategic decisions, as all communities have, to create these TIF districts, to get the infrastructure and the value out of our opportunities, basically the land that we control, for the long-term benefit of the whole city and the whole region. So that's a philosophical, debate that we could have over and over and over again, but the city, I think, has done really well with TIFs. The bottom line about natural growth for the city is we lose money on every property that we take into the city. I don't think that we do a balancing or an evaluation when we, sit here on the real estate committee and agree, as we're going to do tonight, to annex 3 or 4 single lot properties. We never talk about the cost to the city. The sheet comes to us, it says there's a sewer hookup available, there's a water hookup available, there's public services already in the area, there's public safety for fire stations and police, and that's all we ever think about. We spend money per resident a lot more than we get back in property owner taxes. So that's where our natural growth is going. We've grown the city. That's a good thing. No one would go backwards from growing the city. But we have to realize that we have expanded, and we don't have the funds available to pay for the expansion and the services and the standards of excellence and success that our staff want to bring to us. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
So I just wanted to also respond and add to the conversation about our natural growth. That in fact, as I mentioned earlier, this year we did see, I think it was about $6 or $7 million increase in our income because of our, quote, natural growth. And with all due respect, we did talk about those priorities for this city for this coming year. That's why we spent so much time talking about our employee benefits. And it was getting down to, are we going to do, one plan that costs, $3.5 million, or another plan which we're about to vote on for the full year that actually costs over $5 million. And that doesn't include the extra benefits that we added this year for all our employees, where the city will pay for short-term disability insurance, which is a nice addition to their benefit package as well. So talk about the fire stations we're adding, 1.5 mils, that's just to pay for the buildings. That's not even to pay the $1 million to $1.5 million per year to staff and man each of those stations. So in fact, we are utilizing that natural growth of our city to pay for these priorities. The flooding, we will take care of in 2 weeks, as you mentioned. But that's another area where we're growing the budget and we're going to increase the fees because it is that important of a priority for our city. So we may not have exactly talked about it in the terms you just mentioned, but in reality, we were doing just that.
Councilor Wagner?
Sat here for an hour and a half and kept my mouth shut, so I'm going to take about a minute and a half of your time, please, with y'all's indulgence. Every budget on the face of the planet is not fully funded, ever. Okay? When we go to our department heads, I can ask everybody around this table if there's something that's not on this budget, and I bet you everybody can come up with something. Those are called unfundeds. As money becomes available, they pick out the funding and you fund the ones in a prioritized order, which is, I think, what Councilmember Moody had talked about. Is that right, Amy? That's pretty much what we do. If we don't use the money, the cost of gas goes to 10 cents a gallon, and we've got millions of dollars funded for gasoline. Well, that money's reallocated. So having said that, the one budget that my colleague here has been part of seems to have taken part of those unfundeds and added another mill or so to fund them. Well, we have a whole list that I guarantee is not on that, because if you don't have 10% of your budget in unfunded in addition, you're doing something wrong, okay? And that's a bunch of history from this fella, and who doesn't play piano. But bottom line, guys, I think we need to go on and vote it. We've talked it to death. We've talked it to death in several budget meetings, and I know the ad hoc group has talked a lot longer than what I've participated in the budget meetings. So I'm ready to vote it. I'd like to move on, and thanks for your time, guys.
All right, thank you.
Call for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I'm going to, if you indulge me for just 1 minute, I've held my comments. I want to make just a couple quick comments, and I will call for the question. I want to say that I'll make history tonight for myself, a personal record. I've never voted for a tax increase as long as I've been on City Council. However, I spent 6 months with the members of the ad hoc committee going through hundreds of pages of a budget. A tremendous amount of time with staff. We had almost every manager, department head come in and speak to the ad hoc committee, and one by one go through every single request they had, understand what they were looking at, and try to come up with a prioritization. We had $28 million of requests from department heads. We were able to fund $4 million. So when I sit here tonight and I tell you I'm going to do a first for me, it's because I can tell you we've skinned everything out of this thing. We've squeezed all the juice you can get out the orange here. But the other thing is that talking about natural growth, as Councilmember Seekings put it, which I think is a great way to put it. The reality of what we're dealing with is a very rapidly growing community who needs services before we begin to collect revenue from the people who are moving here. So effectively what happens is we've got buildings going up and we've got infrastructure that has to be put in, and streets and water and sewer and fire and sanitation and everything else, but we're not collecting property taxes on those finished products for at least another 12 months. So we're always behind the 8 ball. So the reality of this situation is that although I begrudgingly will accept the fact that we've got to press forward in raising the millage, I think it's a modest increase. I do think with the loss, we'll find probably within 18 months that most of this will be rolled back within our property taxes from an actual net cost to the taxpayers, except for the commercial properties and non-owner occupied. But the reality is that if we don't do it now, we're going to have to do it later. And I'd much rather see us do it now and eat the elephant one bite at a time, and so that's kind of where I'm at. So, with all of that having been said, I'm going to ask it. I don't think we need a roll call, so I'm going to just ask for all those in favor to signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. I've got 2 nays. Seekings and Gregory. Okay. That was for the Ad Hoc Budget Committee's recommendation.
Were there any amendments or adjustments made or not?
Not to that, but moving forward between now and the 18th, there'll be some further discussion. And then before we move to the next item, I do want to personally thank Amy and her staff for spending the amount of time that they spent with us. And I know the other members of the Ad Hoc Committee would agree. It was certainly an eye-opening experience. I know it took a lot of time on y'all's behalf, but I can tell you from the members of the Ad Hoc Committee, it was tremendously valuable for us to have spent that time. So thank y'all very much for all the work that y'all did on this. Councilor Moody.
I just mentioned Councilwoman Jackson was actually not on the committee, but was there every single meeting.
Right.
And gave some good input. I just
that's a great point.
just so she's added in.
Right, that's right. All right, so we're going to move on to item number 8, and that's public service acceptance of the 2016 FEMA grant award to acquire and demolish 3 residential properties. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Now, ayes have it. Item 9 is planning, preservation, and sustainability. Was there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Now, ayes have it. Item 10 is public service, approval of the indefinite delivery contract. Any discussion? Yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Now, ayes have it. Item 11, public service, approval of Spring Fishburne Phase 4 fee amendment. Councilman Moody?
Yeah, number 11, 12, and 13 all have to do with that Spring and Fishburne. And I didn't go to the public service meeting, but could we get a report on these before we vote? Because I understand we've got some trouble that's brewing on these things in terms of cost, and we're approving more contracts here. And I know we got to finish this thing, but I don't want this to be Charleston's V.C. Sumter nuclear plant.
Big dig.
Do we have somebody from public service that wants to address those items? Begrudgingly coming forward to address those items?
It's the award winner.
Indeed. If particular questions?
Well, I just kind of want to know, I mean, this was total $154 million project. Is all of this in line? Are we going to be able to finish it for that $154 million? Is all of that financed? Where are we on these projects? We keep getting them one at a time back, and I'm wondering what the end game is.
Sure, I understand.
If that's a question or...
All right, so with the completion of Phase 4, which is what y'all are voting on right now, that will take the project to where we will be able to start moving some of this water off the streets. Right now, we've finished Phases 1 and 2. We're halfway through Phase 3. And with the completion of Phase 4, we will be building the pump station wet well and the outfall that will actually move the water off the street. The original project budget of $154 million, that was put together way back in 2009 when we were looking for funding from the ARA funding from the federal government. Got the Tiger grant out of that, got the Fed match to fund Phase 2, and the SIB is going to fund Phase 3 and then part of Phase 4. It's not going to fund all of Phase 4. Some of that is going to be coming from the TIF. Right now, the project is a little bit over. It's $154 million, but as of now, we are able to fund it through Phase 4.
Well, I guess my question is, if we look at the 4 phases, because I think it's a 5th phase to come, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So if we look at phase 1 through 4, how much was that budgeted and how much did we spend? Do we know what that is or what that's going to be? Is there a delta there, or do we know whether phase 1 came in?
Phases 1, 2, and 3 came in at what was expected back in 2009. Now keep in mind that we are almost 10 years later. We have taken a project that was going to be done as one project under one prime contractor. Now we have split it out into 5 different phases. We have stretched those costs over 10 plus years.
Well, my understanding was that the whole thing was going to be done in 2020. Let me go back. Are we still on target to do that?
No, we are looking at about 2024 at this point in time.
2024. All right, that tells me we got a big hole somewhere. I'm not sure exactly whether it's cost overruns or just the cost escalating, or whether we've got screw ups or just what. And that's, I mean, we're going down a road here that's very uncomfortable to me, and it seems to me like public service or somebody needs to sit down and start looking at how, well, if we're going to be 20 million, 30 million, whatever the number is, over budget, where's that money coming from? I mean, we're talking about $1 million here. That's a good place for your money.
Yeah, that'd be about 30 mils. Councilman McGregor?
So, out of 154, there's enough for us to finish 4. Phase 4. At 154.
No, that is over the 154 million.
So phase 4 is already over 154 million, is what you're saying? And
the aggregate of the project, not just phase 4.
I understand. Okay. I'm saying the aggregate of the project. Okay. So are we saying that there's not quite enough that we allocated, okay, for phase 4 even?
Can we,
154 was to do all 5 phases. Am I correct?
Originally,
yes.
It was supposed to be in 4 divisions.
Okay. All right. So now are we saying there's a 5th phase? I thought I heard that.
The 3rd division was broken out into 2 separate phases, and that was due to the funding. Half of phase 1, or half of division 3, which was phase 1, was funded through Tiger 1. The other half was funded through the Fed match.
I understand the funding sources,
okay,
and I'm just trying to make this question as simple as possible here, okay? How much more money will we need to complete the project?
Do you have a final on that?
Right now, phase 4 is underfunded by $24 million.
Okay. And phase 4 is the final phase?
No, phase
There's another
one more
phase.
We have
okay.
phase 5, yes.
So we add phase 5 in, where are we?
Probably around $30 million underfunded.
30 mil, okay.
That's right.
What happened?
Well, that's what we're working with Davis and Fleur to come up with an answer for that.
Because that's considerable.
It is, yes.
And we're just finding this out? Council's just finding this out? Tonight? Thank you.
Well, there went that natural growth.
My passion, please.
Yeah. Councilman Waring, then I come to you, Councilor Shade.
With all due respect, I think, and Mr. Mayor, this is the first time he's hearing this, but I think we really need to call a committee of the whole of the Public Works Committee. And I'll tell you why. We did get an explanation from Mr. Kirk, and he did the best that he could at Public Works. But we need more information. And when I say we, all of us need more information, you as well as the rest of council, because we need to know the whys and the how of this cost overrun, why it happened. The reason we need to know that is because out in our future is Calhoun West, which will be much more expensive than September Clark drainage project. it's going to be a painful experience, but if we don't know why this happened or how it happened, it's subject to happen again. So sticking with true transparency, what we really need to do is when, and Ms. Wharton is certainly covered over with work right now working with this budget, but prayerfully we're going to be through this budget in 2 weeks. That said, we actually need a side-by-side comparison. In other words, phase one was supposed to cost this. With contingencies, it ended up costing that. Phase 2, 3, so forth and so on. Because if you were to ask me right now, my life depended on it, what is the actual reason that phase 4 is costing $24 million for a decimal point, really?
Yeah, huge decimal point.
$24 million more than anybody ever envisioned. I couldn't tell you that answer to save my life. And I don't think anybody around the table can really tell you that. So we need to know that. 10 years from now, I probably will not be on this council, but maybe Councilman Lewis will still be here. But the younger people on council are subject to be here, and the institutional knowledge on what caused this to happen needs to be passed along, because during that period of time, Calhoun West and the like will be. So I'd like to ask for a committee of the whole to be held, and our CFO, once she gets command of the money, on how this occurred, along with our engineering department, we can get a full explanation of how this happened, and hopefully some teachable moments on what shouldn't happen again. Thank you.
All right, let me go to Councilman Rashid, then Seekings, then to the mayor.
And part of that discussion we're talking about, Councilman Waring, should also include what happens if we don't complete the project. Because we need to know where we are with the project, what are the benefits of that project, and what happens if we don't finish it out. So we just need to make sure that's a part of our discussion.
Councilman Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe Amy can just answer this. I'm looking at the 3 different items on our agenda. The number 11, which is the contract for 500 and some thousand with Davis and Floyd. It seems to me, in reading between the lines, are we essentially hiring Davis and Floyd to go in there and tell us what the heck's going on? Is that what that is all about?
That's not what those contracts are for, no.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, it says it's project enhancements, design revisions due to as-built conditions, so going back and trying to fix things up and figuring out, and other ancillary items, value engineering, mitigation support, program administration. That sounds to me like a fix-it.
Steve can talk better about that, but I think that was work that was done before in order to get it ready for bid, but he's going to have to.
So has this work already been done?
But yes.
So we're now approving a contract for Davis and Floyd for work they did in doing all that?
Can you answer that, Steve?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question was, the work that Davis and Floyd that we're being asked to amend in item 11 for project enhancement, design revisions, and so on and so forth, if that work has already been completed prior to the appropriations from Ways and Means for the funding?
That is correct.
So that's a problem.
Yeah, we got a lot of problems.
So, if I may share just my own thoughts and report on this as best I can, I believe the primary differential is the fact that the estimates that were done for these complicated phases was done almost 10 years ago. And the world has changed markedly. The construction market has changed. And I inquired with Davis and Floyd myself as to whether they felt like we should throw this bid out and put it out again. And they felt like at this point that it would cost us even more money if we were to do that. That we had, I believe, 8 or 9 pre-qualified bidders for the job. The 2 top bids were very close to each other, which tells you, that it was competitive. In addition, they were within 5% of the most recent estimate for the job by Davidson Floyd. And so what has really changed is that the estimate for doing this job really changed over 10 years. And we didn't make allowances, you know, from a funding point of view over a 10-year period to adjust for that. And we're at the juncture where, you know, with all the work we've done to date and drilling tunnels and beautifying the Septima Clark Parkway, this is the first part of the project that actually gets some water out of there. And so, believe you me, if I had been advised by Davidson Floyd that we could save money by putting this thing out again, I would have been the first to bring that suggestion to you. That is not their belief or their recommendation, and we would be more than happy to have a full council meeting, workshop, whatever you want to do, and dissect each and every phase of it and what the estimates were back then and what they are now, and happy to do that. But the stark reality is, I believe the best thing for our city is to keep going. Sometimes they say when you're going through hell, the best thing to do is keep going. You'll get to the other side.
Mr. Chairman, can I just a quick follow-up? I don't disagree with anything you said, Mr. Mayor. We want that project to be successful and working. We've seen the effects of just a few inches of rain on the Septima Clark. This is a project that many of us were sitting here when this application first went in for the Tiger Grant. It was a wrestling match. We worked really hard with the SIB to get it in place. I think the concern I have, and I sort of heard some groans around the table, and maybe even from the chairman, is that we're now being asked to approve after the fact a very large contract in a budgeting time where we are wrestling with making sure our employees get a raise, and all of a sudden, I mean, you've got $1 million+ worth of things going on here that have already happened. So I just think it is very important on a scale of this magnitude that you, Mayor, and that everyone around this table is kept up to date in real time as to where we are financially with a project that we've heard now. I'd heard it was April 2023. Now we've heard it's 2024. We're going to be living with this project for another 6 years. 6 years. That makes it a 16-year project. So it's a big project. It's one of many that we need to do. It's in some ways a test case, and this test case right now is sort of floundering a little bit. We just need to make sure we get it in line so we can get other projects going and not go broke doing it. Thank you.
Councilman Wagner?
Follow up just a little bit more on what Councilmember Seeking said. Said 24 million we don't have for phase 4 and 30 million for phase 5.
That's collectively 30 million.
Nine more. 33, so simple math, so we're 25% underfunded and 6 years overdue. Yes, is that a fair assumption? And we don't know why. And I'm glad we're not the federal government. I am too. Because in my world, folks went to jail for that. I mean, that was, I'm not there anymore. Right.
Councilman Moody?
Yeah, I just was exactly where you are, Councilmember Wagner. We need to have some answers, and we need to have a plan as to how we're going to go forward. I mean, it really would be a shame if we come down and we got all these tunnels and ditches and holes in the ground and it's full of water and we can't pump them out. And I don't know what that $30 million will buy down at the end, how much of this project, but we need to, this is not a good situation with us approving in the rearview mirror a $6 million project that's already been incurred. This should have been before us a long time before now.
Councilor Lewis?
I certainly agree with Councilmember. We have contingency funds. Anytime you're going over the contingency, you see you're going to spend more money, you need to come back to council. Why this hadn't happened, I don't know. But I certainly like to see us get some answers, because this is a lot of money. And I'm one for sure was hoping that in a few more years that this problem across there on the Septima Clark, it wouldn't flood no more. It would look like, I don't know, I'll be around when it gets finished or not now. The way it looks, I don't know. But we need to get some answers. I think we need, after we get this budget passed, we got very confident people in our budget office that will take care of this, and get us some answers. We give them some praise tonight, now we're giving them some headaches, because this seems like it's gonna be a big headache. 'Cause this is a big cost overrun, so we need to know how we get to this point.
Yeah, I'm going to just make a couple. I would agree. I think it's probably time we pump the brakes on this thing. At the end of the day, it concerns me that we have a project that's got an overrun, but in reality, that happens, right? So just, things happen, you start digging underground, and you just don't know sometimes what you're going to get. But if Councilmember Wagner's math is right, and it's a 25% overrun, then I would suggest that there's a fairly substantial issue at hand that I think this council needs to be made aware of, and not saying that we're going to stop the project and just sort of throw away all this money that we've already invested, but I certainly think this body needs to understand it much more thoroughly. And I will say the other item that gives me even more consternation, though, is if we have vendors who have done work for us and we have not appropriated in this body over $500,000 worth of work, and maybe I misunderstood, but I think that is a much larger problem. I know it sounds odd, but in my mind, that's a much larger problem than a $30 million hole in a project. So I didn't hear anybody make the motion to defer those items.
Second.
All right, any discussion? And that's for items 11, 12, and 13, all related to the spring fish burn.
Can I amend that motion, please, just to defer, and before we bring it back up, to have a committee of the whole meeting with Councilmember Waring and get a report on this?
Absolutely.
I accept that.
Okay.
That's it.
How much time? Okay, so you made the motion. How much time?
I made it.
All right.
You got it.
Councilman Griffin?
December.
We need to, I've noticed that a lot of this money, supposed money was going to come out of the drainage fund. We need to see what all these extra expenditures would do to the drainage fund as well.
December 20th.
Councilman Wagner?
Yeah, just for the record, I want to volunteer my services as a former government auditor to Ms. Wharton, should she wish my assistance. On this.
Drainage and TIF.
All right. Motion to defer. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Item 14 is public service and need approval for the plan review professional services one-year contract with Johnson and Associates. I'm not going to try to pronounce that other name. For $250,000. Is there a motion?
I'm still bumped. Can you go over that again?
Spending more money. We've had all we can take and ready to go home. Number 14, that's the professional services one-year contract.
I'm going to move for approval.
Just a quick question. What does that all entail? What actually are they doing? Are they actually just providing support service to our staff in overflow and looking at stuff, or what is this?
They do stormwater plan review when frankly our staff is overwhelmed with work.
They're in a supporting role, they just take overflow work?
That's right. We'll give them the whole project, they'll review it from A to Z.
Again, that's something going forward as we look at stormwater budgets and staffing and all that. We ultimately should keep all of this in-house if we can. I understand we've got some gaps, but I hope we don't have to see this contract again.
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? As had it. Item 15 is Committee on Real Estate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had item A, was a request to authorize the mayor to execute that easement, SEC&G, for underground wiring down at that property, the old bridge site. That was approved by the committee. The item B, we did not go into executive session. We got a report from the developer of that property on that piece, and we're going to take this back up. We don't think we're going to need an executive session, but we got a report, and that's the property that's kind of across the street from the aquarium parking lot there. And so anyway, we're going to get a deal on that, and we'll bring that back when we get it. So there was no action taken on that item.
So on item A, you need a second item A.
Just A, we need to approve A.
Second.
It's just for information.
So I'll do a second.
So that's so you move for approval of adoption of your report, correct?
Yes.
All right, and there was a second, Councilman Mitchell? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Unless there's no further business coming before the committee, we'll stand adjourned.
We have 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
It's 6:20, we'll start at 6:25.
Thank you.